All right, we've all been there. You're in a conversation that starts calm, and then suddenly, boom, it turns into a full-blown argument. Your tone changes, defenses go up, and before you know it, you're not solving anything, you're just trying to win. But what if I told you there's a way to stop a fight before it even begins? A simple framework, 5 questions that can instantly shift the energy and pull you both back to calm, connection, and control. Let's talk about it. What's really bothering me right now? That's the first and most powerful question. See, when conflict shows up, it rarely announces its true name. We think we're arguing about who forgot to take the trash out or why someone didn't respond to a text, but that's just the surface. What's actually bubbling underneath is something deeper, something emotional. Maybe it's frustration from feeling unappreciated. Maybe it's exhaustion that hasn't been voiced. Or maybe it's that quiet sense of being taken for granted that finally found a moment to speak, and it chose this one. When we pause to ask what's really bothering us, we start peeling back the layers of the situation. It's not just the event, it's the meaning we've attached to it. Without that question, we stay trapped in reaction mode, loud, defensive, and disconnected from what's truly going on inside. Here's what happens when we don't ask it. We end up fighting symptoms instead of causes. We swing at smoke, not the fire. Think about it. Someone says something small and we snap back. Why? Because the brain is trying to protect something unspoken. Maybe earlier that day you felt dismissed by a coworker, or maybe you're overwhelmed and no one's noticed. That small comment your partner made, it's not just about that comment. It's about every time you felt unseen. That's why this question matters. What's really bothering me forces honesty. It forces you to stop mid-reaction and say, hold on, this emotion feels bigger than this moment. That's not weakness, that's awareness. And awareness is control. When you can name it, you can tame it. When you can't, it runs the show for you. So many arguments could dissolve if we took 5 seconds to look inward instead of outward. But that's the hard part, right? Because looking inward means admitting that the problem might not be the other person. It might be what's happening in us. We'd rather point fingers than pull back the curtain on our own discomfort. But that's where emotional maturity begins. When you ask what's really bothering you, you start separating your feelings from the facts. The fact might be that someone interrupted you. The feeling might be that you don't feel respected. The fact is small, but the feeling is heavy, and it's the feeling that drives the fight. Once you spot that difference, you stop arguing about the little things and start addressing the real things. And that's where communication shifts from reaction to reflection. Sometimes what's really bothering you isn't even about the present moment. It's about the past, something old that never got resolved, that still whispers through your tone, a parent who never listened, a relationship where you always had to explain yourself, a moment you felt small and powerless. Those experiences don't just disappear, they echo, and when a current situation brushes up against that old bruise, you react like it just happened again. Asking what's really bothering me invites you to notice that echo. It's not about shame, it's about clarity. Because when you realize your reaction is borrowed from a different time, you can finally respond to this moment with new eyes instead of letting old pain run the conversation. And here's the beauty of that question. It slows everything down. It turns heat into space. You might still feel upset, but now you're not blindly swinging. You're curious, you're grounded, you're taking responsibility for your half of the emotional equation. That's what makes this question powerful. It's not just self-awareness, it's emotional leadership. You're saying, before I ask anyone else to understand me, I'm going to understand myself. And in that pause, everything changes. The tone, the words, the energy. The fight starts to lose oxygen because you're no longer feeding it confusion. You're feeding it clarity, and clarity calms. That's what makes this first question the anchor. It brings you back to center where real communication can actually begin. What am I trying to protect? This question cuts deep because most of the time when we argue, we're not actually defending an idea, we're defending a feeling. Every raised voice, every sharp tone, every defensive word comes from a place of protection. Protection of our ego, our pride, our sense of worth, our need to be heard or respected. When conflict happens, we go into survival mode. Our brain says, you're under attack, even if it's just a disagreement about something small. The instinct to protect ourselves kicks in before reason does. And here's the truth. Every person protects something. It might be their dignity, their identity, their peace, or their control. So when you stop and ask, what am I trying to protect? You start to see the real reason your emotions are on guard. It's rarely the topic of the fight. It's what that topic threatens inside of you. When you're in a disagreement and feel that tension rising, this question becomes a mirror. Maybe you're protecting your image, not wanting to look wrong or weak. Maybe you're protecting your space, not wanting to be overrun or dismissed. Or maybe, deep down, you're protecting your heart, that vulnerable part that's tired of being misunderstood. Every argument has that hidden layer, and when you don't recognize it, you fight harder because you think you're fighting for truth, when really you're fighting for safety. This is where so many conversations go wrong. We armor up, thinking it's strength, but what it really does is block connection. The more you protect yourself, the less you can be understood, because the wall you build for defense also keeps empathy out. Asking this question takes courage because it invites honesty. It says, I might not be angry, I might be afraid. And that kind of honesty changes how you show up in the moment. Protection often hides beneath pride. Pride says, I'm fine, when really you're hurt. Pride says, you're wrong, when you're just scared of being wrong yourself. It's a clever disguise. It looks like confidence, but it's built on fear. The fear of losing control, the fear of not being enough, the fear of being seen as small. And when someone's words touch that fear, we don't pause to reflect. We react. We defend before we even understand what we're defending. That's why arguments escalate so fast. It's not logic meeting logic. It's fear meeting fear. But when you pause long enough to ask, what am I trying to protect? You pull the curtain back on that fear. Suddenly, the emotional fog clears. You can see that what's hurting isn't the person in front of you. It's something inside of you that's begging to feel safe again. Sometimes, what we're protecting isn't even ours. It's something we learned to protect long ago, maybe from how we grew up, maybe from a relationship that made us feel small, maybe from experiences where we had to fight to be heard. Those memories build invisible armor. So, when a current situation feels even slightly similar, that armor snaps into place automatically. You're not just reacting to what's happening now, you're reacting to everything that's ever made you feel unsafe. But when you stop and name it, when you say, I'm trying to protect my peace, or I'm trying to protect my self-respect, that awareness gives you power. Because once you see what you're guarding, you can decide if it actually needs protection right now, or if your mind is just replaying an old defense pattern that doesn't fit the present moment. And that's the real shift. You move from reactive to reflective. You start realizing that you don't need to win every point to stay safe. You don't need to control the other person to feel secure. You just need to understand what you're protecting and why. When you can do that, your tone changes, your words soften, and your body relaxes because the fight no longer feels like a threat. You start communicating from clarity instead of fear. You're not defending yourself against an enemy. You're expressing yourself to someone who might actually want to understand. That question, what am I trying to protect, doesn't make you weaker. It makes you wiser. It gives you the power to step out of defense mode and into awareness mode, where the real conversation can finally begin. What do I actually want out of this? That's the question that pulls you out of the chaos and puts you back in control. Because when emotions take over, we forget what the real goal is. We start swinging words like weapons, trying to prove a point, trying to win, trying to make the other person feel what we're feeling. But stop for a second. What's the point of that? What do you really want? Most of the time, it's not revenge, not dominance, not even the last word. What you actually want is peace. You want to be understood. You want to feel heard, valued, respected. Yet in the heat of conflict, we chase the opposite. We push harder, talk louder, defend faster, and in doing that, we move further from the outcome we truly want. That's why this question is powerful. It realigns your focus. It turns your energy from fighting to win into communicating to connect. It's not about silencing the other person, it's about finding a way forward. When you ask yourself what you actually want, you start realizing how often your reactions don't match your intentions. You might say you want understanding, but your tone says you want control. You might say you want peace, but your body language screams war. That mismatch is what keeps conflicts looping, because both people are chasing a feeling they can't reach through force. If what you really want is calm, you can't yell your way there. If what you really want is respect, you can't get it by disrespecting back. This question slows everything down. It forces your brain to shift from survival mode to strategy mode. Instead of just reacting, you start thinking. Instead of escalating, you start directing. And when your mind remembers the outcome you want, your words begin to follow it. You start choosing clarity over volume, listening over interrupting, patience over pride. The beauty of this question is that it turns conflict into a mirror, because when you ask what you actually want, you're really asking, what am I trying to create here? If the answer is to punish, then you'll stay stuck. If the answer is to understand, then you'll start listening differently. Every argument becomes a choice between peace and power always feels better in the moment, but emptier in the long run. Peace feels harder to reach, but lasts longer when you find it. When you pause to ask what you want, you might realize that you don't even care about the original issue anymore. You just care about being right. And that realization is freeing because it gives you the chance to stop before you say something you'll regret. It lets you shift from trying to win the moment to protecting the relationship. And that shift, that's emotional intelligence in action. Sometimes what you really want isn't even about the other person. It's about you. You might want closure, validation, or even just relief from the tension sitting in your chest. That's okay. But it's important to recognize that you can't always get that by forcing someone else to give it to you. Asking what you want helps you see whether the need you're trying to meet can be met within this conversation or not. Maybe what you want is honesty, but the person you're talking to can't give that yet. Maybe what you want is peace, but the timing isn't right. Knowing that doesn't make the moment easier, but it makes it clearer, because now you're no longer reacting blindly. You're choosing consciously. And that choice matters. It's the difference between saying something that builds a bridge and saying something that burns it. When you know what you actually want, your energy shifts. You stop chasing victory and start building understanding. You stop demanding to be heard and start inviting conversation. It's a different kind of strength. Quieter, steadier, more grounded. And here's what happens. When you lead with clarity, the other person often starts to mirror it. Your calm becomes contagious. The temperature of the room drops, and suddenly you're not two people fighting to be right. You're two people trying to make things right. All because you asked yourself one simple question before you spoke. It's not about control, it's about direction. It's about deciding what outcome deserves your energy and refusing to waste that energy on anything less. What might they be feeling? This question changes everything because it forces you to step outside of yourself for a second and see the moment through someone else's eyes. When we're in conflict, our natural instinct is to focus inward. Our frustration, our hurt, our need to be understood. We become the center of our own emotional storm, and in that storm, the other person starts to look like the enemy. But the truth is, they're probably feeling something too. Fear, shame, anger, disappointment, insecurity. When you ask what they might be feeling, you invite empathy into the room, and empathy is the oxygen that arguments need to calm down. It doesn't mean you agree with them or excuse their behavior. It means you're willing to understand what's driving it, because every reaction, no matter how harsh or defensive, comes from a feeling trying to protect itself. The question opens a door where before there was just a wall. Most people don't want to fight, they want to feel safe. And when someone doesn't feel safe, they do one of two things. They attack or they shut down. The loud ones get labeled aggressive. The quiet ones get labeled cold, but both are communicating the same message. I don't feel safe being vulnerable right now. So when you pause mid-argument and think, what might they be feeling? You're no longer reacting to their behavior, you're responding to their need. Maybe they feel misunderstood. Maybe they feel powerless. Maybe they're not angry at you at all. Maybe they're angry at themselves and don't know how to say it. This doesn't make you responsible for their emotions, but it makes you responsible for your awareness. Because when you can see their feelings underneath their words, you can choose a better way to respond. Instead of matching their intensity, you meet their humanity. This question takes strength because empathy isn't easy when you're hurt. It's hard to consider someone else's perspective when your own emotions are loud, but the moment you do, you gain power, not over them, but over yourself. You stop taking things so personally because you start realizing that most of the time their reaction says more about their pain than your worth. That's a powerful realization. When someone raises their voice, instead of thinking, they're attacking me, you start to think, they must be overwhelmed. When someone goes silent, instead of thinking, they don't care, you might think, they're trying to protect themselves. That shift doesn't justify bad behavior, but it helps you manage your own reaction with grace instead of defensiveness. You begin to respond from understanding instead of ego, and that's where communication starts to heal instead of harm. Empathy also changes the tone of your questions. When you think about what they might be feeling, your language softens naturally. You start saying things like, "It sounds like you're frustrated," or "I can tell this really matters to you." Those small acknowledgments do something powerful. They disarm. People calm down when they feel seen. The second they realize you're trying to understand them instead of defeat them, their walls start to drop. And when walls drop, connection begins. That's why empathy is not weakness. It's strategy. It's not about surrendering. It's about leading the conversation toward understanding instead of destruction. The strongest person in any argument is the one who